Here is another one from the vaults. I recorded this in December of 2011, but it never made it to YouTube. What do you do when you try for the first time a recipe out of a cookbook and it turns out that the recipe was so wrong that when you get done making your dish, you have all of this filling left over? Well, you invent a recipe. You figure out a way to use up your excess ingredients, and that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to sort of get into the ingredients that I'm going to use to make these, and I'll explain that next. This is my leftover filling. If you want to make this from scratch, and I'll have the recipe, the ingredients will be at the end of this video, and they'll be on the PDF of this recipe. I started off by making a bechamel sauce with 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 tablespoon flour, and then 1 cup of milk. That's 240 milliliters, to which I added 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg and 1/8 of a teaspoon of white pepper. I'll show you in a moment how I make bechamel. And then I sautéed 1 small onion that I chopped finely, cooked that for about 5 minutes, and then I added 4 ounces, which is about 115 grams of peas. You can use fresh or frozen. I cooked those for about 6 minutes, let that all cool down a little bit, and then I added 4 ounces, 115 grams of prosciutto, which I chopped up. I bought a whole piece, and I chopped it up so that it was about the size of the peas. And then same thing, 4 ounces, 115 grams of mozzarella cheese that I also chopped up. And then finally 1/4 cup, which is about 1 ounce, 28 grams of Parmesan or Romano cheese. I'm using Romano. To this, I'm going to be adding another 1/4 cup, which is another 1 ounce or 28 grams of Romano cheese, because I want my filling for this dish to be cheesy. And then I have 1 package, which is 1 pound, 454 grams of phyllo dough sheets. And then I'm using about 1/2 cup, which is 100 grams of clarified butter that I've melted. I'm going to be using this to brush the pastry. I have my little French-made ceramic saucepan heating on the stove. This is over medium heat. This is making a roux. You combine butter and flour. I'm going to lower my heat rather down to medium-low. And you just want to cook this flour for a minute or two. I don't want to change the color. I'm going to make a white roux. My goal here really is just to cook the flour, so I don't have that raw flour taste in my bechamel. This has had a chance to settle down a little bit, so there goes my white pepper and my fresh ground nutmeg. Okay, I'm going to let that cool just a little bit more before I put my milk in. That also allowed some time for that helicopter to pass by. Now I'm going to bring my heat back on, set it to medium, and I'm going to bring this up to a boil. And I'm going to switch to my red spatula so I can show you something. Okay. As you can see, that's running right off the spatula. That is not thickened at all. But when I get done with this, it should, if this formula is correct, it should give me a nice sauce that is creamy and smooth and just coats a spoon. Okay, this has been boiling for over 10 minutes actually. I want you to see now how it does not run off the spatula. That's at the coats a spoon, what they call coats a spoon stage. So now I need to let this cool down a little bit. This will form a skin very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some plastic wrap over it, and I'm going to very carefully press the plastic wrap down so that it's right on the surface of that sauce. And that'll protect it from forming a skin. As I mentioned earlier, I only need half of this onion. Set that aside. Peel my onion. And I have a different way of chopping onions than the chefs do on TV. They slice down through it and then cut in this way. I'm always afraid of moving the knife in toward my fingers because I need a fairly fine chop here. I'm cutting these vertical lines close together. That's what I do, is I cut down through and then I turn it and cut through the other way. Now I can cut down through. And there's my chopped onion. I'm heating my larger ceramic saucepan here. My butter is melted. So in goes the onions, chopped onion. And I want to cook these over medium heat for about 5 minutes until they're translucent and tender. My onions have been cooking in there now for 5 minutes. Going to add my peas. Turn the heat down to low. And then put a lid on that. And I'll be coming back to that every minute or two, 2 minutes, to give that a stir. Meanwhile, I'm going to set my timer for 6 minutes to cook my peas. My peas are done cooking. Those I've set aside just to cool. I want to dice my prosciutto here. I'm using a long, thin knife, a boning knife, because I think this goes through the meat more easily. I want a fairly small dice, smaller than my peas. That gives you an idea of the size of the dice that I want. Again, these are about the size, a little bit smaller maybe, than my peas. Likewise, I am dicing my mozzarella cheese. I don't have to be as fussy about this, and the larger knife works better, my big chef's knife. My bechamel has cooled down now quite a bit. I'm going to adjust this for salt. Get out my tasting spoon here. Yep, that's going to need a little bit of salt. Not a lot. Maybe less than half a teaspoon there. Once again, taste this. Better, much better. Now there's my Romano cheese going in. I didn't want to put this Romano cheese in when the sauce was hot, because then it would all be melted and stringy. That's done. I have my peas all set aside here and cooled. If you'll notice, there's no browning in the bottom of that pan. I really sat with this bechamel and stirred it the entire time while it was cooking on the stove. My prosciutto goes in, and then finally, this pan's going to be very full. my cubed mozzarella goes in. Very carefully turn and stir this. Try not to get it on the counter. This is a little bit thick, which is what I want. This phyllo dough comes in 2 envelopes here inside the box. I'm going to start off with one of these. This comes frozen. When you buy it in the store, it's frozen. And you have to let it thaw overnight in the refrigerator. And as I carefully unroll this, those are my sheets. I don't need that excess plastic. And there is my phyllo dough. Okay. All right, I'm going to lay down a sheet here. There's my clarified butter. And then with a pastry brush, I'm going to brush this just lightly. This phyllo dough is very thin. It's very delicate, very fragile. It can tear, so just work carefully. And then I'm going to place a second sheet on top. And again, butter this lightly. Now that there's a second sheet on here, it's a little bit more stable. Okay, and then take a small spoon of my filling and put this on there. I'm going to try to shape it like a triangle here. I actually want that forward a little bit, like so. I'm going to start off by enclosing that end and then rolling the 2 sides over. Like so. Again, making sure that I have a triangle here. And then I'm going to roll this like you would a self-contained spanakopita. Back and forth. Then with a pair of scissors, I'm just going to trim this final edge off because I don't want that hanging out. And there is my little packet. That's one way of doing it. This, by the way, I'm going to place on a cookie sheet that I've lined with parchment paper. Now here's the other way I want to do this. I want to do this 2 different ways because, after all, see already that's tearing a little bit. Variety is the spice of life. Those dark spots are the butter. On the counter, I'm not going to butter all the way down there because I'm going to take this end and bring it in to kind of give myself a square. And then my second sheet, and this time I'm going to let the extra overhang on this end. And yes, if you hear that background noise, that's a jet going overhead. This really is a trailer park near the airport, near the tracks, near the highway. Bring my end piece in. And again, that gives me somewhat of a square. right? Take my filling. And I'm going to roll this up like an egg roll. Make sure this final edge is well buttered. And that's the other style. So I got a dozen of them. And then I melted a little bit more butter here. What I want to do is just cover these with butter. I am, in the meantime, by the way, heating my oven to 400 degrees. Okay, and then I've got some sesame seeds here. I'm going to just sprinkle the top of these with sesame seeds. There. Those are ready to go in the oven. Because this is the first time I'm making these, I don't know how long they're going to need to bake. I want to bake them until they're a nice golden brown. I'm going to estimate that's going to take about 25 to 30 minutes. Here they are from the oven. These were in there 15 minutes. The reason why I took them out a little bit early is because some of them started to leak, as I feared they would. They're on parchment paper. That's why I use parchment paper. But nonetheless, I mean, some of them held together pretty well. Now it's the hard part. I have to wait for these to cool down. I would eat these warm, not hot. Because of the cheese inside, it'll be really hot and stringy, and I would think it could run down the chin and burn me on the chin. So I'm going to wait for these to cool down a little bit, and then I'll taste them to see how they taste. These, by the way, came up off of the cookie sheet very easily because of that parchment paper. Even though with some of them that filling leaked out, they lifted off really easily. They look great. This has been cooling now for about 20 minutes, so it's warm, but not too hot to eat. I can taste that cheese. It has a really nice, savory, cheesy flavor. Nice, delicate pastry on the outside. This is really good. That is perfect. So, excuse me